communication. In this first video, I would like to discuss the motivation. Which are the advantages of visuals compared to text and verbal formats? We spend most of our life speaking, so aren't words enough?
Verbal and textual communication are faster to produce, but they are less effective than visuals. It is well known that we remember much more when information is visualized. In fact, on average, we remember only 15% of what we hear. That's terrible. How can we improve this situation? By using both verbal or textual communication plus images. We can remember 60% of the information. That's a remarkable improvement. Visualization indeed provides a number of advantages compared to textual and verbal information, which we could summarize in the acronym CARMEN. C for coordination. In fact, images facilitate interaction. A for attention. Images get noticed. R for recall. Images are remembered. M for motivation. They mobilize the viewers. E for elaboration, they facilitate understanding, and N for new insight, they enable new discoveries. Let us briefly address each advantage in more detail with examples. Coordination. Images help to coordinate tasks and communication for people working together. This social benefit results from the visual artifacts providing structure for the communication process and recording its outcome. In this way, visualization serves as a useful coordination device. We will see concrete examples and applications later on in the course. Attention. Images raise awareness and provide focus. We cannot help but look at the image of a face or an edgy shape. Here's an attention-grabbing, memorable image with Nemo, of the popular cartoon Finding Nemo, as the main ingredient of sushi. Will that get your attention? Recall. Good pictures are remembered 6 times more than words and help you recollect details, as we have already discussed. As humans naturally think and remember in images. Pictures are especially well remembered if they contain physical objects that we can easily recognize and already know well, but that are perhaps presented in a novel, surprising, and humorous context. Motivation. Pictures energize viewers to interpret and explore the image. This is an emotional benefit that intriguing pictures can provide. They can motivate to interact with the picture and interpret it actively. If I tell you verbally to stop smoking because it might cause lung cancer, it is rather unlikely that you will actually follow my advice. However, if you have a look at this graph, you can see some statistics on cigarette consumption and lung cancer deaths. The graph shows a very scary correlation with the two curves of cigarette consumption and lung cancer death having almost exactly the same shape with a delay of 20 years. A particularly useful visualization format for motivational purposes is visual storytelling. In our research, we found that employees are much more committed to implement the strategy if it is communicated with a graphic representation rather than with words alone. Elaboration. Do you really want to understand and remember something? Then draw it. This is a widely used principle in education, as in this example of concept map. To help students learn a new topic, teachers can ask them to create a map of the content they need to read. This re-elaboration of the content from a linear textual format into a spatial visual format is particularly powerful because our brain thinks in networks and not in a linear format. New insights. This is a core advantage of visualization which is often overlooked. Graphs and images help to think and to understand things in a new way. So what is an insight? It's the so-called aha effect. You look at the picture and suddenly you understand something new. So let's have a look at an example, historical example. In London in 1854 there was the spread of cholera that took the life of 600 people. It was a terrible epidemic, and at that time it was not clear what was causing cholera. They thought that it might be a virus. Dr. Snow was not really convinced by the thesis of the virus because the cases of cholera were rather confined to a certain area of London near Broad Street. If it had been a virus, it should have spread in faraway locations. To test his idea, he got a map from the local authorities and mapped out the location of all the people who died of cholera. On the top right corner of the monitor, you can see the entire map, while in the central part of the monitor, you can see a particular area of the map which zooms into the very center of the image where the most deaths were recorded. Each black line corresponds to a person who died of cholera. Dr. Snow then started to think about the possible causes and added them on the map. So he used visualization to think. He added the sources of water. In the center of the image you can see a black circle indicating the water pump. He realized that the closer people lived to that water pump on Broad Street, the higher the amount of deaths. In a nearby hostel, which had its own water well, there were almost no casualties due to cholera. He had an insight. The water was contaminated and was causing the cholera epidemic. With this map, he went to the local authorities and explained his reasoning. They were convinced and agreed to close the water pump. The cholera epidemic ended, and since then we know the cholera is not caused by a virus but rather by bad water or food. If you travel to London, you can find a replica pump together with an explanatory plaque to commemorate the findings of John Snow, and there is even a pub with his name on Broad Street. So, what do we learn from this example? Well, visualization can help to save lives and to advance science. From a theoretical point of view, we have applied visual-spatial reasoning, as theorized by Tversky. According to this principle, the advantages of visual-spatial mapping are that it provides structure, it organizes information, it reduces the cognitive load, and it enhances the representation and identification of relationships. The source of this example is the popular Tufte book, The Visual Display of Information. Tufte is one of the most well-known and prolific writers on the topic of information and statistics visualization. His books are rich of images with both positive and negative examples. Let's summarize the key learning points so far. The main advantages of visualization can be summarized in the acronym CARMEN: coordination, attention, recall, motivation, elaboration, and new insights. To evaluate the potential value of a visual solution and determine whether or not working visually is worthwhile, think of the key benefits that an image provides in contrast to a purely text-based solution. Also, take into account the amount of effort required to produce and use or interpret the picture. Let's take the cognitive benefits as an example. Does the image you intend to create really help to explain something better than text? Or does it do so more rapidly with a greater memory impact? Compare these cognitive benefits to the cognitive costs of producing the visual solution, that is to say, the effort you need to put into designing it, and that the viewer needs to invest to understand it properly. These factors can be reduced by using effective visualization tools and by following proven design guidelines, which we will discuss in the next videos. This visualization value is illustrated in this formula. You also need to consider the aesthetic or emotional effect that your image can achieve.